somehow became my mom's husband. Which is weird because I have 2 older brothers, so I don't know why I was the man of the house. But I had to make sure everything was okay. I set her alarm clock every night. As I got older, I became my mom's +1 in social situations. When I was in college, my mom and I went on trips that were way too romantic for like a mother and daughter. We went to New York City and shared frozen hot chocolate at Serendipity, and we walked arm in arm in Central Park. And when you're single, there's no one to be like, hey, that's weird, you're on a date with your mom. When I moved to LA, she and I went on a Christmas Caribbean cruise together. Yeah, shared a room. That's too much time with your mom. I started dreaming of icebergs. I said, Mom, why don't you go out there on the ship and try to meet somebody your own age? She goes, why would I want to meet somebody when I have you? I'm like, oh my God. We are headed for a Grey Garden situation. Mom, stop talking to that squirrel. I got a break at one point from being her husband. She got a boyfriend. Yeah, they met in the newspaper, in the classified ads. No pictures. You just had to like each other's grammar. But she was a single mom of 3 kids, and she was a school teacher, so she was broke. And after date 1, she was sold on this guy. She comes home, she goes, I like him. He is rich. I said, how do you know? Because he told me. Oh, okay. Sure. She goes, I know from 3 things. I said, that's very specific. She goes, number 1, he drives a Mercedes convertible. That is rich. I said, yeah, but what year is it? Because when I was in high school, I drove a BMW, but it was 20 years old, and it was a stick shift, and it would just stall in the middle of intersections, and I would have to Fred Flintstone this car out of the intersection to keep from getting hit. When I was going down hills, sometimes the brakes would just give out, so I had to pull up the emergency brake in order to come to a complete stop. And when it rained, dirty rainwater would seep through the sunroof, so I would have to drive with my head tilted to keep from getting pink eye. I'm just saying, follow-up questions are important. She said, number 2, he has his own tanning bed. I was like... Now, for all you youngins out there, tanning beds were all the rage in the 90s. People were hopping in those things left and right. It was like the cold plunge of today. Instead of helping with circulation, it could cause cancer. But, oh, you look great in the winter. And number 3, she was the most impressed with this. She thought this was the measure of success. She says, he owns his very own industrial crushed ice machine. He is rich. She would go to his house on the weekends and take a cooler and fill it up with crushed ice, come home like she was holding a golden bounty, crushed ice for a week. I was like, dinner would be nice, but slushies it is. A couple years later, they broke up. My mom was crushed. Crushed unlike her ice. She had to go back to that broke ice. The ice in the trays where you're filling it up with water and you're like trying to put it in the freezer, everything's spilling. You're like, ah! No, I didn't meet Jax until I was 35. My mom had gotten very comfortable with me being her husband. And at 35, she did not think I was in danger of getting took. So something happened when I met Jax that I did not expect. My mom got a little jealous. Yeah, I remember if I would buy Jax something like a scarf, my mom would be like, I like scarves. I'm like, you're not my girlfriend. Their birthdays are 5 days apart, which is my nightmare. I get heart palpitations in February. I remember early on in my relationship, it was very popular to go on Facebook and profess your love for whoever you were with. So Jax's birthday, I go on Facebook and I'm like, I love you so much. You're the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I posted like 30 pictures in a collage that took 5 hours to put together. 5 days later, I call my mom. Hey, Mom, happy birthday. Thank you. Are you okay? I'm fine. Well, what are you doing? I'm on Facebook. I was looking at my messages, and I don't see one from you, and I know your thumbs work because you used them 5 days ago. I sent you an edible arrangement. What is this? But she was pissed. So I had to unfriend her. I don't know if any of you guys have ever had to break up with your mom. Awkward. Once Jax and I got married, she had another family she had to deal with. She'd get a little jealous if I spent more time with Jax's family than my family. And I was like, well, Jax's mom makes us apple pancakes. And you just asked me to borrow $500. It's just different. It's just different. But she does love Jax. She does. She just thinks that Jax stole her man. My wife is Jolene. But I fly home to North Carolina. I am so grateful that my life has unfolded the way it has. I could have never guessed this. I'm so grateful that I met Jax. She's the best. Jax and I took our next big step together. No, not kids. We actually bought a house together, which was very exciting, very adult thing to do. And Jax is the exact person you want to do this kind of adult decision with. She's very responsible. She asks all the right questions. She was like, how's the roof? What's the plumbing like? Is there mold? I'm like, yeah. And are there ghosts? She looked at me like I was crazy. I'm like, that's a valid question. Because when I was home, ghosts were on my mind. There's these houses in my hometown built in the 1800s, and a lot of ghost sightings have happened there. I don't know what it is about ghosts in the 1800s. The 1800s is a very popular time for ghosts. I'm just saying, you don't see a lot of ghosts in Daisy Dukes. So people have been spotting these ghosts so much that they've become very casual about it in a way that I'm not used to. So I was having lunch with my mom and her friends, and my mom said, I went to the Tate's house a couple of weeks ago. I went upstairs to use the bathroom, and when I came out of the bathroom, there was Catherine. I said, who's Catherine? She goes, well, she's dead, and she's a ghost. And all of her friends go, mm-hmm. She said, everybody knows that Catherine grew up in that house. She lived there her whole life. She never got married, never had kids. She died in that house. And then when the Tates moved in, there was Catherine. She was in the den, the living room, the kitchen, outside of the bathroom. It's just Catherine. I said, so Catherine just comes with the house? Her friend goes, yep, I saw her a couple of weeks ago. She looked great. So hearing about Catherine made me think about the house that I grew up in. It made me think about the house Jax and I were looking at. And it was just on my mind. Now, I've never seen a ghost. I'm more of an energy person, which sounds very LA to be like, I'm an empath. But when I was growing up in this house that I grew up in, it was built in the 1800s. It had such a weird energy to it. I could never pinpoint what that was. I just felt so unsafe in that house. I would make my dad sit outside of my bedroom until I fell asleep, and I would catch him trying to crawl out of the bedroom like my mom in the cemetery. And I was like, Dad, I'm scared. So he didn't sleep for 1.5 years. And then he and my mom divorced, I think because he just wanted to take a nap and get the hell out of the house. So as my punishment, I became my mom's husband. Now, when I was in high school, she got that rich boyfriend I was telling you about, and she would go there on the weekends, and I would be there by myself, so scared I slept with a knife under my bed. Not my cake cutting knife, a different one. And hear about Catherine, this all comes up, and I said, Mom, you know, the house that we grew up in, that house had such a weird energy. My mom said, that house was the most haunted house I have ever lived in. You mean the house you left me in alone when I was a teenager? I had to. I was scared. I said, what did you hear? Well, when I was there, I would hear footsteps at night going up and down the stairs. You and your brothers were asleep. I would hear door slams, screams. That thing was evil. You should have told me. I would have gone to my grandmother's house. Your grandmother's house was the second most haunted house I have ever been in. Your grandfather has been floating around there since 1963. But whatever was in our house was so evil that I said to it one night, if you do not leave, I'm going to call the Duke University Paranormal Department. I don't know if that's an Ivy League Ghostbusters or what that is. She said, but I did not want to fool with it. I decided to put our house on the market. And then she started whispering, but I did not disclose that there was a ghost. And that house has been sold every 5 years ever since. So I believe evil still lurks within. Now, a couple of months ago, I was in Chicago for a show, and the night before, I was leaving a restaurant, and this man stops me, and he goes, I have something weird to ask you. I said, oh, man, I am about to touch a wiener. He said, I think my good friend lived in your childhood home. And he asked me the address. I said, that is my childhood home. I said, can I ask you a weird question? I said, did your friend ever say if that house was haunted? He said, my friend said that was the most haunted house he's ever lived in his entire life. And he and his family moved out after 6 years. So evil does lurk within. That's why I'm saying, if you're buying a house, do not be afraid to ask about ghosts. And if the disclosures say the roof is from 1996, there's new plumbing, oh, and Catherine will join you at the table, don't buy that house. But I'm happy to say that Jackson and I have been in this house now for over a year, and so far, no ghost. So I'm very excited about that. Thank you. You guys really get me. But there is one thing that I wanted to do in this house. Now, in this journey to where I'm at now, it's been about 21 years in Los Angeles, and it took me a really long time to get traction, to work, to be successful. And during that time of working hard and not getting anywhere, I would daydream about one day, if I'm lucky enough to work, to make money, to buy a home, there is something I am going to put in that house, and that will be the symbol of success. And I didn't know where this idea came from. But I will tell you guys that 6 months ago, I installed my very own industrial crushed ice machine. I made it, baby. The only problem is that now my mom wants to move in with us, which would, in fact, make our house haunted. I said, why don't you just come over for slushies instead? She goes, well, I think at the very least that we should, in February, for mine and Jax's birthday, the three of us should go on a cruise. You pay. I said, Mom, I love you, but I would rather go back to the Maldives wearing Crocs, rainbow shorts, and a cutoff tee that just says dyke. That ain't happening. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for being here. Seattle, you're the best.